Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Crabtree. I'm the lead for technology innovations at International Rescue Committee, where I've dedicated a majority of my career to working at the intersection between technology and women's protection and empowerment. I'm really delighted to be with you here today. I wish I was there in person. It's just worked out that video is the best thing to make this happen with this timing. I know that you have been learning a lot about TFGBV from Megan, from readings, from other speakers. So I thought I really wanted to talk with you all about how I think about this really complex form of violence. And I think that falls into two areas, both what contributes to its persistence and ways to think about or kind of frame how we might address it. I'm going to start with two real life stories. I think in this work, it's really important that we keep the human element central to all of this, the people that are affected, because otherwise this violence, it's really easy for all of us, even with the work that you all are doing or are going to be doing, for it to feel very theoretical or abstract, even otherly. So let's kick this off with a couple of stories. When I think about TFGBV, I put this into two areas, which is a bit of an oversimplification, but for the time we have today, I'm thinking about this in terms of public or politically motivated people that are in public spaces, be that politicians or human rights defenders, in one area, and the other area being violence within relationships or within families. So I'll talk about a couple of examples. These are real people. They're not real pictures of those people. The first one here falls into that first area around like public positions. So Nira Foreign is a 22-year-old student activist, or at the time that we have this case study, she was 22 years old. She's a human rights defender in Thailand who faced a lot of severe digital surveillance and legal persecution for her activism. So she got involved with some pro democracy protest groups in Thailand, one group called UFTD to be specific. She knew that this was dangerous work going into it. And so she thought, I want to be involved with this, but I'm going to do it behind the scenes to really reduce the risks that I might face. About a year into her doing this work, she discovered that she had been targeted with some pretty serious spyware on her devices. And she came to realize this because it culminated in a police raid of her home in 2021. Officers came in, they confiscated all of her devices and arrested her on some pretty serious charges in Thailand. One that's related to sedition, and the other one that's specific to Thailand around insulting the monarchy. The police, when they arrested her, mentioned that they had been following her for a very long time, suggesting really extensive surveillance. And I think their thinking was that she may have been targeted, or they might have been spying on her with Pegasus software, which is pretty serious software. Um, she ultimately took a step back from being part of this pro democracy group, although she believes in their objective and their missions. Because of the legal harassment and the digital targeting that she was subject to, she withdrew from it out of fear for her safety and that of her family, which is not unlike a lot of women and girls that are working in these kind of public spaces as activists or as politicians. The other one I want to talk about is that intimate partner violence or violence within the family. So the example we have here is from Colombia, which is one place among many where technology is really being used as a weapon in intimate partner relationships. Um, in Colombia, like many other places, it's easy to find articles that have titles like 5 apps that you can use to find out what your partner is hiding, which really kind of normalizes surveillance in relationships. And according to Colombia's own studies, um, 15% of women have experienced TFGBV, but they acknowledged that number is much lower than what they think is actually happening because much of it's going unreported due to lack of services or many women feeling like, what's the point of me reporting? Like, how is this going to stop? So Maria, not her real name, again, not her picture here, neither of these pictures are real, was a woman that came forward to us. She's in her early 30s. She was separated, then divorced from her husband after years of controlling behavior and domestic abuse. She relocated to a different country entirely after this. Despite being physically separated or having escaped her ex husband, she began noticing signs that he was monitoring her activities. So He would contact her and mention specific conversations she had with friends. He knew about appointments that she'd made over her phone or through messaging apps, and he referenced places that she had been that she hadn't mentioned publicly, like on social media. With this information, he started sending threatening messages referencing her activities. He started to use that information to intimidate people that are in her support network, friends, family, and then started to threaten to expose some of her private information if she didn't comply with his demands. Um, so for Maria, she had a really difficult time proving that this surveillance was occurring. Her ex-husband had a lot of information and knowledge about devices and spyware, and she really hadn't been or worked in that space. And then because she was in a different country than him, that made any options for legal redress really complicated. We'll talk more about the gaps in this space, but that made it really difficult for her to work with local authorities to try and enforce any of the rather weak laws related to digital harms in general. And so she felt a lot of isolation from family and friends in a time when she was already physically isolated from them, and started self censoring herself, and really developed a lot of anxiety over anything that she was doing on her phone. So you can see from just those two stories how complex TFGBV is, both in how it represents and how it persists, which makes it really hard to challenge. Like so many other elements of gender-based violence, it works well, or at least in my mind, to think about this alongside the socio-ecological model. If we want to create change, we want to develop programs to address this, we really have to think about how it keeps going in each of these areas and how we might address that. So I'm going to go through these rather quickly, both how it persists and then what we can do about it. So at that top level, the societal, the policy, the structural level, there are a lot of gaps. A couple that I'll highlight here are around legal structures and systems that really help TFGBV thrive. So inadequate or non-existent legal frameworks for digital harms. You can see from even quick Google searches, there are a number of countries that just have not caught up in terms of legislation to any kind of digital harms, especially TFGBV. If you're in a setting where you are lucky enough to have these laws, there may not be awareness or training around these. So many in law enforcement and other related authorities really lack adequate knowledge or training on TFGBV, which then leads to inadequate responses. And then there's that jurisdictional complexity across borders. So if you think about Maria's case I just mentioned, her ex-husband committing violence digitally remotely from another country, who has the jurisdiction? Is it where Maria is? Is it where her ex-husband is? Is it where the platform is based? All of this makes it really complex, which makes enforcement difficult. And that leads to really low prosecution rates. And then this contributes to a sense of impunity for perpetrators and could even embolden their actions a bit more. Um, and that's not even to speak of how burdensome the legal process is. These are really complex cases and really costly, and that can deter survivors from even reporting or seeking justice. Again, to go back to that Colombia example, they said they had 15% report, but they knew that that was vastly underreported, because what is the point in some cases to report these? What's going to happen to improve someone's situation? Now, if we look at the kind of digital environment, what contributes here? So first, and maybe most obviously, is anonymity. Um, the fact that you can be on the internet and not expose who you are can really, again, embolden perpetrators and make it really much harder to hold them accountable. Again, the lack of regulation. So inadequate regulation of online platforms really allows the spread of really harmful content, as well as TFGBV. And then, of course, there's platform features that enable abuse. So anonymous accounts, easy image sharing. Think about how quickly things can spread and go viral, like how many people you can reach with a very low effort. And then the constant evolution of technology really outpacing protective measures. It feels like we are always trying to play catch up. And finally, the last thing I'll say on this front is the pace of trust and safety changes at tech companies. So they call it by a few different names, but all of these companies like Meta, Google, Snap, they all have trust and safety departments which are really there to work on trust and safety. But In any of these spaces, these people have to work and coordinate with a number of different people inside that company to create any change. So they have to really have a lot of cross-functional coordination and buy-in from product, legal, marketing, and the C-suite, which means all of these changes in a space where technology is evolving really quickly, it's very hard to catch up. So let's look at the community level now. This is perhaps one of the hardest areas to create change because there's not one practical action. There are many that need to take place. And that's really why it persists in a lot of these spaces. So you can think about patriarchal norms, expectations, and beliefs online that really reinforce gender inequality and male dominance, gender inequality in general, which contributes to unequal access to resources, opportunities, power differentials between gender. All of this fuels violence. And then people expect this to happen in digital spaces. Like we kind of all have normalized this thought that digital spaces are going to be populated with people that are rude, mean, or spewing hateful content. And that kind of begets more violence. And then finally, let's look at the individual level here. So for the individual, there are a lot of things that can help perpetuate TFGBV. So let's think first about access inequalities. So there are disparities in digital literacy. Survivors don't understand safety features. They might be economic barriers to access those. So there's a cost to have a VPN, there's a cost to get a secure device, and then unequal access to legal support as well. And then again, to go back to what's happening within the tech companies, if you think about reporting and response inadequacies, so there are limitations in platform moderation. There's slow response time, inconsistent enforcement, and then content moderators may not even be humans, but machines, which means that perpetrators are constantly evolving how they can get past what the machine has flagged as problematic. It's a constant kind of Tom and Jerry catch up and chase that's happening there. Then, of course, in reporting something, we always have the issue of re traumatization for survivors. And then again, law enforcement knowledge gaps. So, in many of the places where we do work at IRC, there aren't digital crimes units. Law enforcement itself might not have stable access to electricity or the internet. So, if you think about the barriers here, they're really significant. Um, just a number of years ago, I was working in Bangladesh and was dealing with a law enforcement unit there who didn't even have cars. They actually had just horses and carts. And that was one of their issues there was how can we address any of this stuff? We don't even have funding for vehicles. We have a horse that people have to figure out who's going to take this out for the day. So we're really talking about huge gaps in how we address these things. And then finally, there are actual advantages for perpetrators in digital spaces. So, in general, TFGBV is very low risk for perpetrators and has really high impacts on the survivors. It only takes you a few minutes to create a fake account, but identifying perpetrators online takes months, and the bar to go after them to enforce anything is much higher than it is to go online and put out hateful content or start stalking someone online. And then again, back to the Colombia example, there are technological asymmetries. So there are specialized knowledge. So abusers with IT backgrounds or the capability to install spyware on their partner's devices might be much higher in a lot of the places where we're working, where there is already a norm that women and girls shouldn't be online, shouldn't have access to devices. So you can see that disparity grow and grow. Okay, so that's a little bit depressing. What can we do about all these? Just the way that we looked at factors that can contribute to TFGBV, according to the socio-ecological model, we can think about the ways to address these factors using the same model. It means that addressing the barriers really requires complex problem solving and recognition that this will involve responses that address multiple layers of the socio-ecological model. So the issue is complex, and how we solve it or how we work to address it is also complex. So let's start with the individual level. At the individual level, one of the most important actions we can take is around education. And the one that I would call out here, and we'll talk about more, is in terms of digital literacy. I just talked about that disparity between survivors and perpetrators. How often in humanitarian settings and also in development settings, there is a negative connotation towards women and girls being online. This means that programs that strengthen digital skills and share specific information about security and privacy practices and how to recognize and respond to online threats are incredibly important. And what we would call this in our work is digital literacy that is safety prioritizing. So it's not just digital literacy to get people better access to and more knowledgeable about their devices and in being in digital spaces, but really focusing on the safety elements because then we are designing it around survivors when we do that. We know they're going into digital spaces with the potential for more harm. How can we make that safe for them from this perspective? I will share a link, or Megan can maybe help me out and share a link with you all to our article in Forced Migration Review on some of this work in Yemen, which again, I'll come back to in a moment. So next, let's think about the community level. So in this, we need to think about programming. And programming that looks to address TFGBV needs to look at a couple of different components. One, specialized support services for these survivors. The way that GBV practitioners have been working with survivors needs to be modified. Um, for example, safety plans that have been traditionally used for offline violence have to be modified to really accommodate for online or tech facilitated methods of abuse. This means that when we go to safety planning, we have to understand the client's digital footprint. We have to know what are all of their digital entanglements to identify all of the potential avenues for harm. That is a huge departure from how we have talked about and thought about safety planning up until this point. You could use tools like technology assessment questionnaires or conduct technographs. All of these tools can be really helpful for that. But that requires not only the tool to do that, but the training for a lot of our staff. The disparities that we talked about before around digital literacy, that same thing is replicated for a lot of the staff in the places that we work. So that education and training needs to happen at multiple levels. And then at this level and at higher levels on the model, we have to think about ways to transform harmful social norms by really promoting positive gender norms, challenging misogyny, and that can happen through education in various ways, through awareness campaigns, media engagement. At the institutional level. So here we want to think about holding tech companies accountable by establishing standards for platforms that prioritize user safety, um, that really aid in implementing effective reporting mechanisms and transforming content moderation practices, not just to be more transparent, but to be more effective, to lean into enforcement. And then another big one is around understanding trends by collecting data on TFGBV. Again, to go back to Colombia, they said 15% of women have reported TFGBV. We know that's severely underreported. The problem is that collecting data on TFGBV is not a simple act. That on its own requires a lot of coordination and standardization on terminology, how you count incidents, and safe ways to share that information. This one alone will require incredible coordination to get done, and it's really important and is almost entirely behind the scenes. So, no surprise here at the top level, the societal level, we need programs that really strengthen legal frameworks. In many places, we need to develop and implement laws and regulations that specifically address TFGBV, that ensure accountability for perpetrators and access to justice for survivors. Australia is really leading the world on this. If you're interested, check out the work of their e-safety commissioner. They are doing the most on this right now and are really a model for where other places, other countries can go. And then in general, finding ways to empower women and girls. This is a big one. There are a lot of different ways to do this. We really need to be working for ways for women and girls to have equal access to education, economic opportunities, political participation, which can help dismantle all of these structural barriers we talked about before that are really kind of leading to TFGBV spreading and becoming more prevalent. All of these factors are really connected, and the services and action that we need to take stretch across all of these levels. I have just a little bit of time left, so I want to share about one of the actions that we've taken in this space. We're looking at a number of these factors in this model, but this one is maybe the easiest one to talk about here. In 2020, after doing a lot of research on gendered gaps in technology, access and knowledge of, we developed a gender sensitive and safety prioritizing digital literacy curriculum for women and girls specifically. This is meant for humanitarian settings. It's called Safe Space to Learn. You can look it up, it's available online. We posited that if a GBV response program provided mobile devices, access to the internet, and digital skills training that was designed for women and girls to access in safe spaces, there would be improvements in equitable uptake to technology, and this could positively impact service access as well. So we designed this to work in women and girls safe spaces because I'm short on time. I'm sure Megan can talk to you about this or probably already has talked with you about what those spaces look like. We incorporated these two together. So it's kind of like a psychosocial life skills curriculum in the safe spaces, and Safe Space to Learn is just one component of that. This curriculum was designed specifically with a focus on safety concerns, on access to mobile devices and the internet. What are the routes to harm? How women can work around that to prevent or respond to that, which is why it's designed for women and girls in these spaces. Um, our first programming of this in Yemen, out of that came a fourfold increase in knowledge, which is really exciting on its own. But what was more interesting was how it ignited a lot of conversations inside households that helped to shift those social norms as well. A lot of women came out of the program and said, my family has now decided that our daughter should get a phone or that we should start a digital business. And it completely has changed access to devices in a way that's not just handing women and girls a phone and then that ends up creating more harm for them in a household where there are negative social norms. This created a space where the members of households and the community saw that this curriculum is about safety, and it wasn't promoting things that, like, some of them may have thought that we were like promoting romantic entanglements for women being online, which is a common concern. This is really about safety, and it really gave space for these conversations because this program happened over a number of weeks, to change a lot of norms inside households. So again, this is looking at like an individual level change by looking at education, digital literacy in this case, but it had some impacts on other layers of that socio-ecological model. This is just one way to take action in this space. Really, with any of these, the more coordinated we are with these services and programs, the more we think about the multitude of ways that we need to and can create change along those different layers of the model, the more impactful this is for women and girls. Um, Thank you so much for giving me the time and space to come to your classroom remotely and on video. Really appreciate it, and so glad that you all are talking about this topic. Thanks so much.